we started engaging. No, I think it was 2020, Evidence 2020. There was an output which was the evidence, the EIDM Manifesto produced from that series. And following that event, there were a couple of engagements, and it has been a reason why a work stream for Evidence 2023 has been maintained for evidence capacities to encourage these engagements, looking forward to how to take these discussions around the manifesto forward. But before we resume, I would want to take us through a couple of housekeeping issues. First and foremost, we invite you all to participate as much as possible. And also, this session will be recorded and is being recorded now. And so let's be mindful of that and how we engage. Our cameras will remain off to respect colleagues who will be joining this discussion from low bandwidth settings. Let us make sure our microphones are also off and allowing our moderator and panelists to engage with each other as much as possible. At the appropriate time, we will be invited to make our own contributions. But in between time, if you have any issues, you can drop them in the chat box available on your screens. In case of any technical hitches, you are allowed to engage with Charity, who is in the room now, using the chat box, and kindly channel all your technical as well as the context issues that we'll be looking at through the chat box, and Charity will be engaging, forwarding them or sharing them with the moderator, and the panelists will address them as well. So back to the manifesto, like I mentioned earlier, we had the working group in 2020 drafting it and then engaging with members to produce the final version, which was published sometime 2021. It was an output of the the purely online version of our evidence series events. And the manifesto serves the purpose of a declaration from all ecosystem actors within the continent, engaging or seeking to channel a common point on how capacity development is practiced on the continent. So these are kind of this is an outcome of a series of engagements with as much inclusivity as possible. So every practitioner had that opportunity to contribute to the process. It is Africa-led, and so practitioners like yourselves gathered here and others who are working on the continent made inputs into the process. And then it serves as a resource and inspiration for the ecosystem as well, covering all the different angles of the ecosystem, including producers, users, and intermediary organizations. And it serves as it questions the mainstream views that we have on capacity development, as well as trying to create a pathway that is informed by the realities that practitioners engage with on the continent in our daily practice. You can access it from the AEN website at any point when you visit the website. You can also follow the AEN's social media handles and link for these resources. The manifesto is presented on those fronts as well, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn especially. Now about this webinar series for 2023. This is the first of it. We are anticipating 4 other webinars taking on different issues with respect to capacity development for EIDM in Africa. We aim to create a platform for sharing experiences and ideas that enhance capacity development for evidence use on the continent. We also seek to use this to generate ideas for wider ecosystem strengthening efforts and also improve and illustrate the AEN's manifesto on capacity development for evidence use in Africa. So at this point, we have our moderator to expertly handle the discussions by our distinguished panelists. So in the person of Emily Hayter from OTT Consults. So Emily, you have the floor now.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you very much, Kurchas. Looking forward to this discussion. I am just going to turn my video on so I can say hi to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'm just going to briefly introduce the panelists today, and then I'm going to hand over to them, and they're each going to make some just very short initial introductory remarks, and then we're going to be opening up. But as Kurchas said, please do drop your questions in the comment box as we go. So what we are looking at today is innovative approaches that are being used in the region to strengthen capacity for evidence-informed decision making. And we have great panelists here to talk about diverse approaches to this in different contexts. So I'm not going to read everyone's full bio because you will have seen that when you signed up, but I'm just going to briefly introduce our 3 panelists. So we have Professor Avea Nsoh, the founder and chief executive officer of TEERE, which is part of the community of practice promoting data and evidence use in development interventions in the Upper East region of Ghana, and also director of the Institute of Educational Research and Innovation Studies at the University of Education in Winneba, Ghana. So welcome, Prof. We also have Penka Bogne from eBASE Africa in Cameroon. She is a researcher and lead evidence broker storyteller at eBASE Africa. I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. I know that eBASE Africa has done some really exciting work on storytelling, which Penka has led within eBASE Africa. They use that for research evidence dissemination, and that's been the focus of trainings, webinars, and the subject of multiple different projects. And then we also have our 3rd panelist, Leyla Abdullahi, Senior Research and Policy Analyst at AFIDEP. She leads the EIDM theme within AFIDEP, which includes work related to strengthening different aspects of individual and institutional capacity. So I'm sure you'll agree that we have a very exciting panel to hear from today. And I'm going to hand over, maybe starting with the last panelist I introduced, so starting with Leyla, to the panelists just to make some initial comments, so 3 to 5 minutes tops, and we're going to leave plenty of time to hear questions and answer and have back and forth with the audience. So over to you, Leyla, then to kick us off.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear. Can you? Yes, good. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning for some of the colleagues in the global context. So basically, I'm called Leyla Abdullahi, working with AFIDEP, African Institute for Policy Development. So within AFIDEP, we work on various work. So basically, AFIDEP, if we just I can give some small background, it's African Institute for Development Policy, which is a Pan-African Research and Policy Institute established in 2010. The main mandate is try to bridge the gap between research, policy, and practice. And among the many work we do within the institute is to try to nurture the evidence used in decision making. So basically, we look at the three broad ecosystem within the EIDM, evidence-informed decision making. And I can give examples what kind of innovation we did. I've been doing lately. If I can give example on individual capacity strengthening component. So the idea is we worked with a specific niche within the big area of demand. So basically we worked with technical working group and sometimes we also work with parliamentarians. So the idea is to work with specific group, and we did training, which the number of days training, and also the most important thing was the mentorship. So this had seen the team ensure that they have worked over time to produce a product, which some of them include a policy brief and how do they communicate this. Importance of having a mentorship is you take them through and they work on a topic of their interest, and you hold their hands through the phase. It can take 6 months, and some can take 9 months, and some can take as short as 2 weeks, depending with the group. So the struggle with that is sometimes you end up having some quite lots to follow. But the trick how we did that was try to ensure that if it's a long time, like 6 months, we do a face-to-face catch up. We used to call it stock meeting event, where we meet face-to-face. Otherwise, everybody is busy running with their own priority area. Another area where we have worked very well is trying to introduce the EIDM curriculum within the institute, with the university postgraduate team. The idea is that it's hard for institutes like institutes to continue training small pocket group of cohorts. So if you try, the concept is you try to incorporate within an institute which run their mandate, daily mandate is to train, we'll have a critical mass at the end of the day outside. When I say outside, among the citizens who will be all knowledgeable on EIDM. So the great thing with this is that after certain time, let's say in a number of years, we'll have basically literally everyone who finishes university, or we also introduced within a institution that are handling civil servants. For example, in Kenya, the Kenya School of Government is one of the examples. So if those people who are already working are captured, and those people who are not working, like who are graduating afresh, will be captured. So the idea is to have a critical mass on evidence-informed decision making. Those are some of the innovations we have tried within the institute, and it has really worked well. And some of the universities and institute have like introduced within their graduate school the EIDM course, and now they're running with it comfortably. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leyla, for kicking us off there. Really interesting examples, and I have lots of questions, but I'm going to hold on to them and let Penka pick up. Penka, can I pass over to you?
Thank you very much, Emily, and hello, everyone. So I would like to share our experiences on how we at eBASE Africa we use innovative approaches to actually build capacities. I would like to really emphasize on the fact that we are really keen on building capacities in a wider range of stakeholders. We build capacities in practitioners, policymakers, and the general public at large. And looking at policymakers, over the years, we have worked with a government institution to build the capacity of Francophone policymakers on how best to use research evidence within their policy process. This was with the main objective to enhance equitable access and use of research evidence in the policy process within Francophone Africa. We have also been working closely with local traditional storytellers for a wider dissemination of research evidence in different communities. We have also worked with practitioners. We have engaged teachers on how to use on how to use the audit and feedback approach in order to enhance and build learning and teaching capacities. And we really hope that we will be able to add more value through our experiences and capacities to the manifesto. And one point that I would like to highlight is that we have also realized the importance of building capacities in local traditional storytellers on how they can use the approach of the on how they can use the African tradition of storytelling to communicate evidence-based stories in their different communities using their different languages. This has actually really helped in ensuring that community members can actually participate in the translation and dissemination of research evidence. And of course, we have our storytelling approach where we try to communicate evidence-based stories to community members in order to help them, build them with the capacities to make evidence-informed choices. So I think I will stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Penka. My first question is about the approaches that you've used. I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting about the AEN Manifesto is that it has that emphasis on explicitly acknowledging and addressing power imbalances in knowledge production and use. I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember how exactly it's phrased, but I'd be really interested to hear from both of you, Leyla and Penka, a little bit more about what adult learning approaches you took or you take in your work to address inequities in the knowledge system. And especially maybe if you don't mind me adding a side question, Leyla, if you're working with civil service schools, to what extent are they interested in framing, addressing equity considerations in terms of adult learning approaches? And is that a similar approach to AFIDEPs or different? Yeah, how do you find that? Maybe we go to Leyla first and then Penka. And I believe Prof is going to be shortly joining us, but I'm kicking off the discussion now.
Thank you so much, Emily. So thank you to mention that with such a team, the idea is, first of all, they're embracing the use of evidence to inform their decision, and it's something that it has really, the demand is really getting, for them in the last decade. So in terms of, for example, now the senior civil servant, basically it's a school that trains civil servants, more of a promotion course, as an example. So EIDM is one of them that has been trying to introduce in the system. So what happens is they go for 2 weeks. So they cannot take more than 2 weeks or on average. So with EIDM, the adult learning, basically, it has to be more of hands-on with a lot of practicals, mostly in the afternoons, because having lessons throughout might be quite some boring. And also they need to be, for example, now, let's say day one, to understand the public policy and kind of examples. And then in the afternoon, they work on a topic of their interest, prepare potential topic they discuss in group work and etc. So by the end of the day, 5 days, they will end up probably having some ideas on how to prepare a policy brief. So the idea is if you leave this team to go away, they might not come back because of other priority within the government system and fraternity. So what happens is they are given another 1 week to sit down and work on their products, which can include an evidence brief, policy brief, because not everything end up with a policy brief. As we know. So they end up having a group work presentation. It's quite very engaging. In fact, they even have some role play to play along the session. So it's quite very engaging and practical. And that way it makes the session quite interesting. And with, of course, pre and post to assess the knowledge obtained, and definitely now to see after that. Probably with such a team, we don't do a long follow-up and mentorship. Contrary to that team, it's more of training of researchers where within the research institute, where they are quite, they have quite some time, when I say some time, and they prefer long-term phase of mentorship, virtual, but also that one has its own risk of having quite some loss to follow up. So that's where I mentioned that we have a face-to-face stock meeting every month. On the other hand, the parliamentarians and the ministry team, the Ministry of Health, where we have worked very closely, equally for them, we go for a longer term mentorship, almost 6 months. And for them, they're interested with not only how to communicate a product, but also how to synthesize evidence, which is one of the, the core work of the evidence-informed decision making, because for you to have an evidence that you want to communicate and disseminate, you need to synthesize, probably appraise it. That's where the bulk of the work is. And that is why now the Ministry of Health have really worked on the concept. For example, we had a group from Kenya and Malawi, where this work has informed some guideline. We have the breast cancer current guideline that were informed by evidence synthesis from the Ministry of Health from Kenya that they worked on it. And that work has really made an impact by informing the guideline on the breast cancer as an example. We have other key example, the parliamentary from Malawi. They have really passed even laws and bills on how the parliaments can strategize and inform, use evidence to inform their decision. So all this, we have tried to see the balance between researchers, the ministry, the public health sector, the government team as well, and including also the various cadre of, actually say student, but trainees at a higher level, a postgraduate level, and also those people who are working at the different sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Leyla. Penka, what about in your work in Cameroon? What adult learning approaches are you taking to address equity issues in capacity development? What's different when you're doing capacity development that addresses equity issues than if you're doing a general or blanket approach?
Thank you very much, Emily, for that question. So as I earlier said, we are actually very keen on building capacities in a wider range of stakeholders, as I earlier mentioned. And the way we try to bring equity within our innovative approaches, I'll start by talking about policymakers. I earlier mentioned that we are kind of like inclined towards Francophone Africa. This is because there is this dominance of the English language within the scientific field. So it makes it in such a way that the Francophone part of Africa is kind of left out in terms of research. So we try to see how to enhance the capacities of Francophone Africa in the use of research evidence to make decision making. And with our RIP project, where we try to create responsive evidence system for African policy needs, we have been able to work with policymakers in Cameroon, Niger, and Chad, which are all French-speaking countries. And what we do is that we try to build the capacities of policymakers. We try to work closer with policymakers in order to identify what can be their challenges in terms of the use of research evidence, what could be their research need. And the peculiarity of our approach is that we try to ensure that the policymakers are actually in the driver's seat. This is to ensure that the research that is actually conducted responds to the identified needs of the policymakers. We equally try to see how we can translate research resources into French language and also generate new resources to ensure that these policymakers in the Francophone community have access to research evidence. We have also been working with storytellers, with local storytellers, to ensure that they too can be involved within the evidence ecosystem through the translation and dissemination of research evidence. I would like to mention the fact that just in Africa alone, we have close to 2,000 different languages. And how do we ensure that people who do not speak English, which is dominant language in science, have access to research evidence to make evidence-informed choices. So we feel like it is important to work with local traditional storytellers, build their capacities on how they can use research evidence to build evidence-informed stories to communicate in their different communities in the different languages. Also, looking at how we bring equity within our innovative approaches, we try to ensure that citizens who need research evidence but do not have the capacity to access it could actually have the evidence they need to make informed choices through our storytelling approach. It's important to note that our community is made of a diverse population with different backgrounds. We have non-digital citizens who cannot have the capacity to go online to search resources on research databases to make decisions. We have non-literate community members who cannot read or write. And just like I earlier said, we have citizens who cannot even speak the official languages. So what we do is that we try to use our storytelling approach to make sure that the research evidence is being communicated to them in a digestible form. And also looking at equity in terms of in relation to practitioners, we have been working closely with teachers in order to increase educational attainment in Francophone Africa, because we've realized educational attainment in Francophone Africa is quite low. So we try to build the capacities of teachers in audit on how to use audit and feedback to improve learning and teaching within their various communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to just give you brief advance warning for Leyla and Penka that when we open up for questions, I hope that panelists will have questions for each other as well. So if there was something you were wondering, please hold on to it. I'm just going to invite Prof to give us just a couple of minutes introduction to your work, Prof, on capacity development for evidence use. Whose capacity are you building and what approaches are you taking to do that? If you could give us a quick overview, and then we'll be opening up for audience questions right after that. Prof, are you there? Can you hear us? Or should we go to questions? While we are waiting,
Prof is muted.
Okay. While we're waiting for Prof to unmute, I wonder, Leyla and Penka, if I could just take one quick question from each of you for the others that we can hold on to, that we can pick up on when we start the discussion round. So Leyla, would you like to throw in a discussion question there for us?
Yes. Thank you so much. This is just an addition before I bring a question is in terms of the ecosystem, we shouldn't forget that beyond individual and organization, we have also an environment. So how do we ensure we have a conducive environment, even though we train individuals, even though we put this training in a various platform? How do we ensure that within where I work, if I start, for example, synthesizing evidence in the right way, using quality and systematic way as an example, how will my boss take up? So this is a question, and also I want also to share some experience how we are working on this. Probably just before the rest come in. So we have, for example, we had a project that was looking at the performance and appraisal incentivization. I know incentive is a topic that is very, it can bring quite some controversial, but we're not talking about money in real sense. So we worked with the Ministry of Health, where we wanted to understand what system are there in place to ensure that those people who have, I mean, let me call them the champions, people who have moved, a step ahead to use evidence to inform their decision. How are they incentivized, as an example? So we found out that the system doesn't have a specific documentation where, let's say, you can have a promotion, or let's say if you publish 2 to 3 papers based on a policy brief or manuscript, you can get some additional incentive. So that project is still in progress, but the idea is we need to ensure that the system is conducive for the environment of EIDM to be nurtured, and some people to work on it comfortably. And this also goes hand in hand. We can train the rest of the team, but I mean, if the senior management team are not trained or given awareness or on EIDM, they might not understand and probably do not appreciate the importance on use of evidence to inform decision making. So one of the components and projects we're working on, we looked at the senior management team, where we didn't have to train them on the comprehensive EIDM complex training, and that is where now we have various training customized towards our audience, as an example. So that was our one-day training for the directors and the senior management, where it's more of awareness and sensitization on what EIDM is. And then we even had a toolkit as like a guideline on like a scoring sheet. What does he or she has to know for him to at least have knowledge that his members or his colleagues are using evidence systematically in a way to inform their decision. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leyla. Any quick question, Penka, that you would like to pose? And then we're going to try again, I think, to connect Prof to make his remarks. Otherwise, I'll go to general questions.
Thank you very much, Emily. One general question I will want us to reflect on is really how can we ensure that Francophone Africa is really engaged in the evidence ecosystem. This is because we have done quite some studies, and an example, we try to hit the search in English, and we have a variety of studies. We try to hit the same question, the search in French, but we do not find any studies, or maybe the studies we find are particularly gray literature. This is just to show that even if Francophone Africa has that desire to use research evidence, do they really have access to the resources? So I just want us to see how best we can answer that question. And also we need to realize that most of the journals are mostly English language journals for publications. So those are some of the reflections that I want us to be thinking around how best to improve the use, the access and use of research evidence within Francophone Africa for equity. Thank you very much.
Fantastic point. Thank you, Penka. And also your point about just the sheer diversity of languages on the continent of all the stakeholders that you mentioned is, yeah, a very important point for us all to think about. I am going to have a look at questions from listeners. There's one for you there, Penka, which is about your existing networks or partner organizations that you're working with. So if you could hold on to that one, I think we're going to try again with Prof. So Penka, if you can hold on to that one, and then anybody else in the audience, if you have questions that you'd like us to pick up, do please put them in the comment box, and we'll pick those up after Prof makes his remarks. Okay, Professor, are you there? We're handing over to you for a couple of minutes of just an introduction to your work on evidence capacity strengthening.
Prof is muted.
Yeah, I was
Teams.
just.
There
yeah,
we go. Hello,
good
yes, we're
afternoon.
hearing you well now.
Sorry. Yeah, I was hearing everything. I was seeing everything. Unfortunately, I was not. I couldn't speak everything. So, sorry about that. I had been thinking about 1.5 hours from now. I didn't know that it was actually 12. About half an hour ago that it started. So, I still apologize. So. My organization is TEERE. It's located in the Upper East region. We've been doing a whole lot of things. But in terms of this evidence ecosystem, I'm talking within the capacity building space. And for us as an institution over the period, internship and mentorship has been the core around which we have built our own capacity and the capacity of young people coming to join us. And as most of the time has been successful, starting about 7, 8, or even, let's say, between 7 and around 8 years ago now. 8 years ago, we had to depend entirely on student interns, because here in the kind of institution we have, or country we have, people are employed, people are retired, people are working, yet they each trying to provide voluntary job is very difficult. So you have to try and use intern service persons, and that means you have to, alongside this internship, you have to actually have people mentor them. Unfortunately, with me here, and I also had to use some of our friends from other organizations. We had to build partnership within our own country, first within the private sector, and also within the government sector. And so our Regional Coordinating Council, for instance, have been a major partner. And so we also send our people there to try and learn. At the same time, we extract from what they already have. And alongside, we also have collaborated with external institutions who are to call, who I usually refer to as the Senior Expert Service, SES, in Germany, who send us technical advisors all the time to guide us. I'm currently with one of them, Gerhard Laut, who has been working with us since the inception of the institution. We have had other capacity building people who will build our capacity through themselves, with our staff, young staff working with them. And then we have grown the people for over the years. Unfortunately, we have lost some of them. So for us, the issue of capacity building has been sort of, the evidence is ingrown. It's not something that we have had to learn it from outside. Of course, people like us who have grown all our years mentoring young people, growing young people, of course, that has been our profession, and we have grown ourselves through mentorship. And so we have to institutionalize that in our own organization in order to build it. And that, so internship and mentorship has been, of course, there have been other issues that we have used in terms of capacity building. But just brief, just because I have been late, I think I should get concentrated on these two so that I can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Did you have a question for anybody else on the panel, something that you think we should be unpacking in the discussion, or would you like to listen a little bit longer?
I think I prefer to listen a little bit, because I've been late and there's just so much I didn't hear, so I want to listen a little bit.
Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, so we have one question which I already handed over to Penka. There's another question in the chat from Tracy Bailey. Thanks, Tracy. Great question there. What advice does the panel have for, one, what to focus on in capacity strengthening for research teams, policymakers, and young people for the use of evidence in ways that are meaningful and appropriate to young people? Great example there of tailoring capacity strengthening activities and design to groups which may be excluded from decision-making spaces. So that definitely speaks to our equity theme there. And secondly, strategies for how to manage power differentials where young people are involved. Another great question. And another question for Penka there, methods and approaches to translate research evidence into stories. Before I hand over to the panelists, I'm going to throw in one question of my own, which is, how do you tailor your capacity development design or approaches to the particular political contexts that you're working in? Very diverse political contexts in this panel. And I'm sure we all know that evidence use is deeply political in many ways. So how do you design your work in that political environment that is constantly shifting? What does it mean for your capacity development design and the way that you implement it? So I'm going to go to Penka first, then Leyla, and then Prof. And if you can just pick up on one or more of the questions as you feel is appropriate to your work, that would be great.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you so much for those wonderful questions. So I will start with if we have external partners. Yeah, we strongly believe in collaboration, and one of our key points is collaboration and partnership. So we have international partners with whom we have been working, and of course, we also have national partners. Still, at the level of partnership, I would like to say we have gone a long step in a long step ahead in signing partnership agreements with the government of Cameroon in 6 different ministries. And we also work closely with local partners in the different communities in which we implement our activities. And of course, in order to exchange experiences, gain resources, and all of that, we have international partners with whom we work. I don't know if this answered the first question. I think I'll let the floor for other partners to answer the other questions. Then I'll chip in when necessary. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. Okay, over to Leyla then. Leyla, maybe you can tell us about politics. I know AFIDEP has done some interesting work around political economy analysis. I believe in your work with parliaments. I hope I'm right there. But yeah, I'd be really interested. How have you designed, developed, changed your capacity development work in response to political contexts?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, that is correct that we have worked with a different context, and most of them have some influential on political environments. A good example is when I gave an example on introducing the curriculum within the university, it wasn't straightforward as it might sound, because there's bureaucracy within the system, and also within the university, there is a body that regulates what course to be introduced over time and what not. And I think they have specific timeline on when they can revise curriculum to bring on board, as an example, a new curriculum on board and such kind of things. So that is one of the, I should call a hurdle, or I should say some of the struggles back and forth the discussion where it wasn't straightforward. But luckily we had they gave a solution where we can introduce as a short course to start with. And then later, as we're waiting for the university to revise their curriculum or go through the relevant specific bodies, in the meantime, it can go in as a short course because the demand is there. And already one of the graduate school have advertised this for a May intake, and it's already packed from the public. And that's why how it shows things are. On the parliamentarian and the Minister of Health, for example, it's another context where you have to work with their specific a timeline as well, and they need a number of approvals from the relevant seniority within the ministry. So you might plan for a training or a mentorship this time, but the group they'll tell you last minute, no, we'll have to postpone because we didn't get approval and such kind of thing. However, I think it needs patience and a bit of follow-up, and one of the strategy is to ensure that when they are revising, when I say there is the Ministry of Health, for example, or parliamentarian, we incorporate this activity within their work plan. That is more easy to ensure that this is done rather than working in parallel direction. Otherwise, to be hard for you. If it's part of their work plan, then it's clearly demarcated certain time, certain thing has to happen if resources is available and etc. So working together with them and making sure that it's within the timeline before when they're revising their timeline, which happens every June, is very critical for this activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of some of the key points I've heard so far, I mean, there's a huge variety, it sounds like, of stakeholders and entities whose capacity you are all building in different ways. And everybody's been strong on pointing out the ecosystem, the importance of systematic approaches. We've seen the individual, organizational, and environment level of capacity, you know, as framed in the manifesto coming through, and also heard about. I think between the lines, I'm hearing about that difference between kind of technical capacities and skills and softer capacities and skills, buy-in, awareness, sensitization, working cultures or behaviors. And so we're hearing about a whole mix of those. And really interesting as well to hear about the different kinds of partnerships that you all have across that whole system, and how you practically navigate political and bureaucratic timelines, realities. I can imagine that the interests must be shifting all the time, the power dynamics can shift and so on. So yeah, really, really interesting so far. We have another question in the chat from Mekdeem from Ethiopia. This is your first webinar. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And keen to know how many countries are using this EIDM curriculum. I think the panelists might know more on this one as well. My sense is that I'm aware of many different stakeholders across the continent and also within Ethiopia. I think, as far as I know, there are several different stakeholders doing different kinds of training on EIDM. So I'm not sure whether there's one kind of EIDM curriculum that's being used, or that there might be several different stakeholders. And actually, Kirchhoffs, I don't know if he's allowed to step out of his chair role for a second, but he might be able to contribute on that one if we're allowed to pull you in, Kirchhoffs. I can see Penka has her hand up as well, and maybe we can go back to Professor Nsoh as well. So Penka, would you like to go first, and then Kirchhoffs, if you'd like to add anything too, and then Prof.
All right, thank you, Emily. I just wanted to add a little bit more to the youth project, about the youth project, what can be some of the approaches that we can recommend. So I would just like to focus on our experiences at eBASE. We have been able to come up with a child protection song where we try to educate kids on how to fight sexual and gender-based violence through the child protection song. And also, I have seen a question on what are the approaches. Still sorry on what to focus on in terms of capacity strengthening for research team, policymakers, and young people. I would like to say it's also important to try first to assess their needs, what could be their needs in terms of research. And I think you can do that, and at the end reach at the consensus on what to prioritize based on what your stakeholders decide to prioritize as maybe the challenges or the mitigation, or maybe the solutions that they want to see being implemented. I also saw a question on what methods or approaches do we use to translate research evidence into stories. I would like to say our storytelling approach is actually very systematic. We have been able to develop it into a systematic approach of 7 different steps, and it actually flows with many other scientific theories and frameworks. So the 7 steps, we have the identification of the problem, the diagnosis of the community, the search of the scientific evidence, development of evidence statement. We have a strong collaboration between the researchers and storytellers to ensure that the stories are actually evidence-based. And then we have the storytelling session itself, and then we have the evaluation of the evaluation of the stories on the intended change on the intended improvement in behavior, knowledge, and intention. So that is what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Penka. Professor Nsoh or Kirchhoffs, if you wanted to add anything on Ethiopia as well.
Thank you. It's good politician must have evidence in terms of capacity building in the kind of political climate we find ourselves. You know, first of all our institutions here, I can say, are mostly politicized, right from the regional coordinating council that sort of takes care of region, all the districts. You have a political head that is there. So any form of activity that you want to do, everything is politicized. So two things. First of all, we had a platform where we allowed all duty bearers, all community people, citizens, to engage and to respond to various development needs. Now, this allows us to generate a lot of evidence that we use not only for our work, for the various institutions that have been involved, particularly the district assemblies, which in most cases have very little in terms of using data for decision making. And so recently we got in collaboration with CDD, one organization that is mostly based in the capital, community of practice, where we brought all stakeholders to try and we work with various districts. And in the region that we are currently working with the Bogne East, one of the districts who actually performed well in terms of generating data for development, working with us and the CDD. And so we are doing that project to ensure that all the institution, that entire district is able to generate data that can be used all along in terms of decision making, in terms of planning and or what have you. So within the political realm, you have to find a way to navigate to ensure that you produce evidence in terms of whether in data, through research, as we do here, so that we can share it within our the kind of community, the kind of organization that we work with throughout our lives as an institution here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kurchafs, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you so much, Emily. And just to touch a bit on the question on the EIDM curriculum. So there's nothing like a common EIDM curriculum, but each organization within the field decides which area of EIDM capacity gaps to focus on. But then the manifesto, as was produced, was more of a collaboration. So different organizations brought their contributions depending on their focal areas, and yeah, especially for capacity development, and all these things produced the manifesto we are working with. So it's not, it doesn't address a specific capacity gap, but it's inclusive of the gaps that exist within the practice around the continent, contributed by organizations who are using or touching base on different curriculum components in that are relevant for their works. Thank you.
Thanks. And 9 in the comments is bringing us back to the question of reaching groups who may be marginalized or excluded from evidence systems in how we design and implement capacity development. So a question there for Penka about whether eBASE Africa's approach has been able to reach people with disabilities. Spoiler alert, I think as far as I know, eBASE Africa are experts in this. So Penka, I'm sure you can take that question. And I would be interested as well from Penka or Leyla or Prof, if there's anything specific that you've done on gender equity in your capacity development approaches when you're designing and delivering training on evidence use. Is there anything different that you do in the design, the content, the delivery, which is inclusive and ensures gender equity? And I know that has been a gap in this sector for a number of years. It's been flagged in a couple of evaluations, you know, that there could be more done there. So I'd be interested in anything that people are starting to do there. Go to Penka first.
All right, thank you very much, Emily, and thank you for those questions. So I will start by saying we are really keen on gender equity in our work, So we try as much as possible to ensure that there's actually a representation of women in everything we do. And looking at the question about disability, yeah, we try as much as possible to ensure that every group member of the socially vulnerable people are included in all our approach and in every step. I also want to seize this opportunity to say we are going to give a workshop on storytelling during the Evidence 2023. So I will invite everyone to register to that workshop, take part, and learn more about our storytelling approach. Thank you.
Leyla, would you like to come in? I see Professor Nsoh has his hand up as well.
Yeah.
Let's just hear if Leyla would like to make a comment. Great. Okay, so Leyla first, and then Prof.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for highlighting that this is a gap in the area. So basically what we do is we try to ensure that female are equally represented in the group that we train or we work with equally as the males. This is the best we do. Otherwise, there's no other measures or any other different strategy in terms of ensuring that gender equity is addressed. Thank you.
Prof, I think your hand is down now. Would you still like to make a comment?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Emily. Just to say, for us here, women empowerment and disability issues is at the forefront. In the last several years, we have been working with the persons with disabilities in this region, where we actually have our headquarters. We've been working, for instance, to try and build the capacities right from the community level, where they show that everybody is included. And that meant, for instance, that we needed to have hold several workshops with the disabled people in every district across the 13 districts in the region. We had to develop capacity, systems that will allow them to understand their own fund, which for a long time they have been cheated on. We had to try and build the capacity of their leadership to ensure that they manage the fund very well. We had to develop some apps to ensure that they understood their own system. So, for instance, the fund that every year is dedicated to this person with disabilities, for some years, it's either misapplied, it's borrowed by the disassembly, or it's not spent at all. But because of these capacity building strategies that we had, from now, even those who were not included, a lot more now have been roped into it, who now benefit from the funds. And because of the capacity that we built for their leadership, and even for members of the assembly, and for the committee that's managed at the assembly, it has reduced the level of corruption that was highly associated with that program. So for us, capacity building is almost equal to inclusivity, and that has been very, very successful in this particular case. And there are several other projects that we have run with the disability groups, building partnership with them and the Assembly and Regional Coordinating Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to invite Kurtjafs again. Kurtjafs, if you have anything else you'd like to add to these questions. I'm using moderator's privilege to pull the chair into the panel here a little bit, but I think we all know Kurtjafs has a lot to share here as well.
All right, thank you very much, Emily. And I'll just pick on the question that Tracy Bailey asked earlier. I think Penka responded, but just a few things to add. So the first one, so I acknowledge the program that your organization is trying to put in there. So on the first question, asking on which capacity strengthening areas you should focus on, like looking at the specific targets, the recommendation according to the manifesto is that you will get closer to these potential beneficiaries and try to understand what is already happening in there, what other actors are doing with them, and see what the gaps are, so we don't duplicate already what exists, and then get them involved as much as possible. One way to do that is to do kind of capacity needs assessments with them and see which partners they are working with and which areas those partners are focusing on. And the second one is on the strategies that we could use. I mean, you could use to manage power differentials, and that's very interesting because we've noticed that also in some previous works we've done, and it's again getting close to these beneficiaries, trying to get them uneased even before your training sessions with them, trying to assure them of no. One thing we've done, for instance, would be to invoke what we call the Chatham House rules, and trying to assure the participants that whatever is shared in the training sessions or in your meetings should remain in there, so that especially the junior officers feel confident enough to talk these issues out, and then have kind of separate sessions with the senior officers prior to these engagements to assure them also, so they don't take things very personal when they have these common meetings with the junior officers. So these kind of prior engagements are very helpful to diffuse these tensions before you meet with these audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So we are nearing the end of our conversation. I'm just posting in the chat a couple of questions bringing us back to the AEM's Manifesto for Capacity Development in Africa, which is where we started. And I'm going to invite each of the panelists just to give us a very brief last word, speaking to one or both of these questions. So the questions are, what does the discussion mean for the AEN's Manifesto for Capacity Development for Evidence Use in Africa? What does this discussion mean for revising it and keeping it useful? And how would you suggest it to be used in transforming approaches for EIDM capacity development in Africa? So about one minute or so each, if you can give us some headline final thoughts from what you've heard today. Let's start with Leyla, then Prof, and then last word to Penka.
Thank you so much. So based on today's discussion, takeaway for Manifesto is I've seen even we have put there examples of some of the capacities that can be included. So it tells you that based on the need of the audience, as mentioned by Kashaf, we need to do a need assessment. For example, if one need to understand policy making process, someone else understand how to translate the knowledge and etc. So this is very critical. The bullet point listed there is it's anonymous. It cannot be finished today, but the point is those are the few. It will be good also to map which organization in the region or which institute is doing what training as an example, so that at least, or we can say that, let's say 2 or 3 institutes are training on M&E as an example. So those are the things that can be shared somewhere within the context. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Nsoh.
Thank you very much. I wasn't at the beginning, but I think 2 things. First of all, I believe for this to succeed, we should be customizing whatever evidence-based capacity building thing that we want to try and institutionalize. That we're going to customize it for the region. We're going to customize for each area and each institution. And this is why. It's because we are growing globally, but at the same time, we are deepening in terms of diversity. I mean, that's what we are missing for some time. People continue to think that we are going global, but all the time we are, as we walk into your own office, you become a little person just in your own world. So we need to be customizing whatever information, whatever evidence that I want to find. whatever institutional structures we need to customize it regionally, institutionally. Second, we need to be building all this on collaborations, because for us, even as a small organization, the only way we have been able to grow in whichever level, including our capacity building needs, has been to collaborate with both external and internal, both private and public institutions. And so for me, to be able to achieve what we want at this level, we need to customize to our various needs. And that means, as Madam said earlier, we should also be thinking about mapping out and do needs assessments and mapping out what is it that we really actually need for going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last word to you, Penka, and then Kirchhoffs is going to pick up and close for us.
Thank you very much, Emily. So I will want to end by saying it is very important that we really consider using tools and approaches that are relevant to the African context, and also keep up with our activities on building capacities in various stakeholders at the level of policymakers, practitioners, and the public at large. And I will also say it will be very important to lay more emphasis on equity in terms of stakeholders. How can we ensure that all this diverse population can actually have access to research evidence in terms of language, and also equity in terms of including socially vulnerable people in the evidence ecosystem? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will hand back to Kirchhoffs to close the session. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. This was a really interesting discussion. Great to hear so many different examples of capacity development for evidence use in different contexts.
All right, thank you very much, Emily, for that amazing work at bringing out these different issues from our very able panelists. Content that they contributed, including the different approaches, touching on the postgraduate works that AFIDEP and the parliamentary side that AFIDEP has been working on, eBASE's own storytelling things, communities of practice, and mentorship that TEERE has also been doing in northern Ghana here. All these are very amazing approaches that are coming forward, telling us that capacity development is not just about training, but weaving out using these other approaches that can deliver the very content or capacities, capacity needs that we aim to address. And these discussions are not finishing now. We are only closing this webinar here, but the discussion continues on the LinkedIn page of the African Evidence Network. So colleagues here, if you're not following the AEN, kindly do that on LinkedIn. We will be continuing these discussions asynchronously, and the recording is going to be available. As we mentioned in the beginning, the session was being recorded, so the recording is going to be available, and the link will equally be shared on LinkedIn. And then a blog will be produced summarizing these different perspectives that have come into the discussion. So don't get disturbed that the discussions are ending here and that we are continuing. In the next month, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're aiming to have this webinar sessions as a monthly event. So do look out for the next webinar in May. The date and time are not confirmed yet. So once confirmed, invitations will be thrown out, and we do expect to have you and others who are practicing on the continent to join us to bring out these issues. Particularly the next webinar will be looking at the implications of these different approaches that we talked about today and seeing how all the different stakeholders, the different actors are to internalize these, customize their approaches to better address capacity gaps using these different approaches that have been highlighted during this session. It's going to be interesting, and we look forward to engaging you all. Thank you all. Thank you, Emily, once again for that amazing work. And we look forward to having everyone here, including our panelists, join the engagements on LinkedIn. Ciao for now. Enjoy the rest of your day.